There is a system that produces fish, eggs, and protein-rich greens from the same patch of water. Not from a factory, not from bags of feed, not from a supply chain. It fits in a backyard. It runs on sunlight and rainwater. And once it finds its balance, it does something modern agriculture almost never does. It starts feeding itself. This system is not new. It is not an experiment. Versions of it have fed entire families for more than 2,000 years. And here is the strange part. Most people think a pond needs to be stocked, fed, filtered, and controlled. The old system worked almost the opposite way. One animal produced waste. That waste fed invisible bacteria. Those bacteria fed plants and microscopic life. That life fed fish, and the fish fed the family. But that is still only the first layer. The same pond supported ducks. And those ducks did not just produce eggs. They fertilized the water, hunted insects, stirred the bottom, and restarted the food chain every single day. Fish below, eggs above, greens on the surface, a living filter around the edges. Researchers in the 1940s documented that ponds managed this way produced several times more fish than unfertilized ponds. Without a single pound of commercial feed, that finding never became a government program. And then the Western food system arrived, and the pond disappeared. Not because it stopped working, because something else was easier to sell. Welcome to my channel. Every video unearths one more secret they forgot to bury deeper. In 475 BCE, a Chinese statesman named Fan Li retired from political life and wrote a document that would survive for more than 2,000 years. It was not a philosophical text. It was not poetry. It was a precise, practical guide to building and managing fish ponds. The document described pond layouts, methods for selecting breeding fish, managing populations, and harvesting without destroying the system. Fan Li called fish farming one of 5 essential methods for living well in China. Not a luxury, a foundation. But Fan Li did not invent the pond. He documented what farmers along the Yellow River had already known for centuries. As early as 3,500 BCE, those farmers had noticed something. When seasonal floods receded, carp were left behind in low-lying depressions. The fish stayed, fed on what the water carried, and reproduced. When farmers began deepening those depressions and reinforcing the edges with clay, the fish remained through the dry season. The pond was not built. It was observed into existence. Then came the Tang dynasty, and a single imperial decree changed everything. Around 618 CE, Emperor Li, whose family name was identical to the Chinese word for common carp, banned the farming, selling, and eating of that species. For farmers who had relied on carp as an important source of protein for generations, this was not a minor inconvenience, it was a crisis. But what happened next was not collapse, it was invention. Farmers turned to related species, silver carp, grass carp, bighead carp, mud carp, each fed at a different level of the water, converting every layer of the pond into food simultaneously. A political ban, designed to protect an emperor's name, had accidentally produced the first polyculture system in recorded history. This was not just fish farming, this was biological architecture, a living machine built from constraint. But here is what modern science would later confirm about why it works so well. In 1947, a researcher at Auburn University in Alabama began asking a question that most agricultural scientists were not asking. Dr. Homer Swingle wanted to know how much food a small pond could produce, not with industrial inputs, but through the biological processes already present in the water itself. His findings were clear. Fertilized ponds produced several times more fish than unfertilized ponds. Nutrients entered the water, microscopic algae multiplied, zooplankton and insects followed, fish fed on that chain, and the chain fed itself. The pond was not a container for fish, it was a living nutrient engine. That research was published, and went nowhere. It did not become policy. It did not reach suburban neighborhoods. But the biological logic Swingle documented was the same logic Chinese farmers had been applying for 2,000 years before him. Modern science was not inventing the idea. It was measuring it. Then researchers went further. They began studying ponds where fish were raised together with ducks. A duck eats insects, aquatic plants, and small organisms. What the duck produces falls back into the water, feeding plankton, feeding fish. The duck was not just an egg producer, it became part of the pond's own fertilizer system. And floating on the surface was duckweed, a plant that can contain 20 to 35% protein by dry weight, grows rapidly, and pulls excess nutrients from the water while feeding ducks and fish simultaneously. The pond was not producing one food source, it was producing several, through a chain of biological relationships that required far fewer purchased inputs once the cycle was established. So, why did none of this reach the people who needed it most? Here is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Swingle's research was published in 1947. Fan Lee's system had been documented for more than 2,000 years. The biological logic was sound, the productivity was measurable. And yet, the productive backyard pond never became part of mainstream Western food culture. Not because the biology failed, because the economics pointed somewhere else. Consider what a productive pond represents to the industrial food system. A family with a balanced pond buys less commercial feed, less synthetic fertilizer, less packaged protein, less dependence on a supply chain that can raise its prices whenever it wants. A pond runs on sunlight, water, bacteria, plants, insects, and time. You cannot patent sunlight. You cannot trademark a nitrogen cycle. You cannot sell someone a monthly subscription to duck manure. The modern food system was not built around what works indefinitely. It was built around what sells repeatedly. When European settlers arrived in America, they brought cattle, pigs, and chickens. Animals that fit easily into fences, barns, feed markets, and commodity agriculture. The productive pond did not fit that model. It required knowledge, observation, patience, and timing. And knowledge, unlike a feed bag, cannot be invoiced every month. Through the 20th century, agricultural institutions taught pond management, but mostly as farm ponds, sport fishing destinations, or decorative landscape features. Not as household protein systems built around ducks, fish, plants, and nutrient cycling. So ornamental pond culture filled the gap. Garden centers sold pumps, filters, UV sterilizers, and branded koi food. The productive version was replaced by a version that fed a retail market. It did not disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it did not create enough customers. Start with the site. Find a low stable area where rainwater naturally moves. A small starter pond, roughly 10 by 15 feet, 4 to 5 feet deep at the center, is enough for a family system. Do not add fish first. That is the mistake most people make. The pond has a sequence. Fill it and let it rest. Then plant first, cattails and iris in the shallow edges. Submerge plants in the deeper zones. Duckweed on the surface. Wait 4 weeks. Let bacteria establish. Let the invisible cycle begin. Then add a few ducks. They will activate the water immediately, stirring sediment, adding nutrients, starting the chain. Then, and only then, add fish. Bluegill and channel catfish are practical choices in many parts of the United States. But check your local fish and game rules before stocking anything. In the first year, observe more than you intervene. By the second year, if you did not rush it, the pond begins to behave less like a project and more like a living food web. The secret was never the fish. The secret was the sequence.